Evening and welcome to Flat Earth United Kingdom. The heliocentric deception is in essence the story of the Jesuits. Joining me this evening is Johnny Cirucci. How you doing, Johnny?
I'm doing great, Nathan. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Indeed. I'm really pleased to have you. It's been a few weeks in the making, this interview. So as I said at the start of the show, the heliocentric system is pretty much the story of the Jesuits. And as far as I'm aware, you're the most educated man in this field that I know of. So I'm hoping we'll kick off with you telling the layman audience member, first and foremost, what a Jesuit actually is. So I'm going to turn off my camera first and foremost and run out some screenshots while you do that.
Sure. And I can start, if you want, I'll kick it right now.
Say again?
If you're ready, Nathan, I can kick that
you go
right
ahead.
now.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So, hey, full disclosure, I am a Protestant, born-again, fundamentalist Christian. That's my bias and my prejudice. I came about this as a result of being a passionate, patriotic, former Italian Catholic, not a former Italian, but a former Catholic. I'm still Italian, and was very frustrated with, I lean right of center in my ideology. 20-year military guy, time in the Marine Corps, the Army National Guard, and very frustrated with how it was I couldn't get any answers. Couldn't get any answers to serious problems, even from supposed alternative media here in America. There's right-wing, quote-unquote, alternative media, Rush Limbaugh, Fox News, Mark Levin, Sean Hannity, Bill O'Reilly, and I just kept getting the same stuff from them. It was propaganda, and really with the Obama administration, the advent of the Obama administration, it was clear that they were pulling their punches, and they were all saying the same thing. They were all reading from the same sheet of music, which at that point I got very disgusted, and I started looking outside of those sources of information. And well, the first one to go to for someone that's trying to get better information, of course, you go to Alex Jones. And Alex Jones presents some excellent material on symptoms, on fluoride and police state and chemtrails and so forth, but they're all symptoms, and he never really gets to root causes. So I continue my search because I didn't buy it. And I will tell you, the breaking point for me was the supposed death of Osama bin Laden in 2011, right on the heels of the Obama birth certificate controversy, birth certificate controversy. And I happen to know, I had inside information outside of common sense and doing research on it, that it was not what we were told. It was actually a ludicrous idea for members of SEAL Team 6 to go in and take the most valuable asset of the global war on terror, shoot him on sight, and dump him in the ocean.
We got a cartoon for that too, didn't we?
Yeah, oh my goodness. The whole thing was a cartoon. It was so fabricated. Here's how I knew we were being lied to. Official information, official photos were later acknowledged by those same official sources to have been faked. The photos of bin Laden, the bloody face of the dead bin Laden, were later acknowledged by mainstream sources to have been faked. There was a photo in the White House Situation Room that I'm sure many of us have seen, the picture of Obama and Biden and Mike Mullins and John Brennan, the drone executioner, and Hillary Clinton with her hand on her mouth. That's the kicker right there. Supposedly watching the blow-by-blow of SEAL Team 6 as they went in and executed Osama bin Laden. And then we were later told by mainstream sources, Associated Press, mainstream news sources, that picture was a fraud because there was no live real-time feed from SEAL Team 6. They repeatedly changed the story. First, the operators fought through a bodyguard. Then there wasn't a bodyguard. There was a firefight, and then not a firefight. First, bin Laden had personal bodyguards around him. Then he didn't. Then he shielded himself by one of his wives. Then he didn't. And these are official mainstream sources that are changing their story again and again. It's like a mass shooting.
There was a bit you missed. You missed a bit about how they identified him by having a similar height soldier lie down next to him, which I thought was ludicrous.
Oh well, then I didn't even catch that. All I heard was they checked his DNA on site. Come on, really? Why would you do that? They tortured Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. They waterboarded Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, KSM, something like 180 times, supposedly to get every scrap of information out of him. But Osama bin Laden, shoot him on sight, dump him in the ocean. How stupid are we? How stupid are we? And so when all of the mainstream so-called conservative sources, Fox News, Rush Limbaugh, Mark Levin, Sean Hannity, all carried the water for that ridiculous lie of a story, I knew that we were being lied to across the board, being lied to. So I continued to dig deeper. I came across a guy who was kind of like an author and historian that gave out some fantastic information I never heard before, that traced just about every critical event in human history, at least from the dawn of the Roman Empire to present, to Rome. And he used names, places, and dates. Now, I'd had experience as a university.
Sorry, who was that?
I had experience as a columnist for the university paper when I was in college. And then after that, I picked up as a blogging from like 1994 on. So I had been playing with writing and researching for decades. So when I listened to this guy give this information, I'm taking notes and I'm looking this stuff up for myself, and I'm getting it verified. Crazy stuff. For instance, he made this crazy accusation that the atom bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were never dropped. They were planted by the Jesuits who had been in Japan for several hundred years. And as proof of this, he gave the story of the USS Indianapolis that had delivered to I don't know if which bomb it was, to the B-29s at Tinian DeLahey, I think was the island where they were stationed. And the Indianapolis, big story. If you've ever seen the movie Jaws, Steven Spielberg, it actually plays a major role in that movie, where Robert Shaw's character Quint talks about being on board the Indianapolis, how the Indianapolis was torpedoed. The Indianapolis was absolutely set up. They were told radio silence and don't zigzag, and their position was given away, and they were torpedoed. And this guy said they were set up by traitors who answered to Rome. And the proof of this was that they all went down. They were torpedoed. The Indianapolis was torpedoed on the feast day of Ignatius Loyola, July 31st. I think it was 44. And I looked that up, and oh my, he was absolutely right. And he made this comment like, those brave sailors were given up to the sharks on the feast day of Ignatius Loyola. And that's just one example of just a myriad of facts that I looked up for myself, and it shocked me and woke me up. I had my second awakening.
So what was the purpose? I mean, I don't know the history of that. So what was the purpose of the sinking? I mean, you're saying it was like a sacrifice?
Exactly. The Rome and the Jesuits use. There's a passage in the book of Daniel that describes the beast of Rome as different from previous beasts. It's no longer a political military power. The old Roman Empire was a political military power. The new Roman Empire is a beast unlike any other, because it's a massive parasite. Here's a better example for non-Christians. The Marvel Avengers movies. Captain America, big favorite of mine. Hydra. Hydra
Sure,
is
sure.
a metaphor. Hydra is a metaphor for the Jesuits. They're a parasitic organization that uses other countries' militaries to do their will, and they use the countries that they hate. They use America. They use America's military to conduct crimes, and then they hang the American people with the blame, and they hate America at the same time. A great example is Vietnam. Vietnam was engineered by Cardinal Spellman in New York. It's actually, researchers call it Spelly's War, and it was purposefully engineered to have no resolution, and and have it be a meat grinder for what Rome calls heretic Buddhists in Vietnam and heretic Protestants here in America. And it was a punishment on both countries. Same thing for Japan and the atomic weapons. Needless crimes against humanity that occurred with those atomic weapons being dropped. Absolutely needless. Done to punish the Japanese because the Japanese had kicked the Jesuits out in the early 1600s. Now, I'll pause there to explain who the Jesuits are. Was you and I were talking before we went live. I'll go back to I'll go back to Judaism. Judaism, we Christians believe that Judaism was a religion, series of festivals and sacrifices and do's and don'ts that was instituted to instruct man about sin and salvation. And then we Christians believe that the advent of Jesus of Nazareth was the Messiah, and he made that religion obsolete. And the interesting thing is that religion became a tremendous source of power, particularly for the Jewish people. Really is very much like any religion today, in that the Jewish people looked up to their priests as a very, very special position. There's no more terrible power than the power of condemnation or salvation over someone's soul. People will do and have done unbelievable acts because they felt their soul depended upon it to this very day. So along comes this radical rebel rabbi from Nazareth who says, okay, don't need the religion anymore. All you need is me. And as a result, the Jewish power structure colluded with their Roman oppressors and had him executed. And it's interesting that parallel also runs through to today. We have a collusion by well-placed Jewish traitors at the top, not the Jewish people, well-placed Jewish traitors at the top with the power, which is Rome. So at the death of Christ, we Christians believe that we're now free. We are the arbiters of our own souls. We control our own destinies spiritually. There's no more powerful freedom than that, and it's based on our understanding of Scripture. No longer did people rely on the whims of human beings. They went to a written document and said, no, we're guided by this. And it was very, very, very freeing. Within 500 years, first came a lot of persecution, both from Jews and Romans. And again, from Jewish leadership, not the Jewish people. And the Roman power structure. At one point, it was so bad that Nero took Christians and covered them in pitch and lit them on fire just to keep his gardens alight at night. Just evil, absolute evil. Well, the persecution changed with Constantine, who at around 300 AD was a general trying to reunite the Roman Empire. He believed that he had a vision before the Battle of Milvian Bridge, where Jesus told him In this sign shall you conquer. And it's believed, I think it was Herodotus, that said that the sign in question was the Cairo, which is a monogram acronym. The P and X is Greek, kind of like an acronym for Christ and for Christians. And supposedly, Constantine put that monogram on the shields of his soldiers and was victorious at the Battle of Milvian Bridge. And within a few short years, he was the sole emperor of Rome. So things changed dramatically with Constantine as emperor. He stopped persecution of the Christians and kind of codified Christianity, made Rome a central point of power and authority. And by 538, the Emperor Justinian crowned the Bishop of Rome as the Bishop of Bishops. And so that's how you had the centralization of power in Christian authority in Rome. Unfortunately, after that, Theodosius I think Theodosius was before Justinian actually, made Christianity the state religion of the Roman Empire. Well, that caused some problems because the Roman Empire was very, very pagan. Pagan beliefs that went back through Greece, Egypt, all the way back to Chaldea and Babylon. So what happens to all these pagan beliefs? They were melded in Christianity in a syncretistic fashion, a mixing of the two. And not to offend our good Catholic brothers and sisters, but essentially that's why there are so many Roman Catholic beliefs that are different from Protestant beliefs. Protestants pride themselves on drawing their beliefs only from Scripture. In fact, they use the term for it, sola scriptura. There are so many beliefs that don't run with Scripture because their roots go deeper and further back. They actually go through Greece, Egypt, and Babylon. This whole idea of, for instance, the whole idea of venerating a mother and child over the child himself goes all the way back to Isis and Horus, the mother, the queen of heaven, and the messianic child. Further back than that goes to Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz. So these ideas are actually pretty old, and that's what makes up a lot of Catholic beliefs. So there was a new power structure that again took over the role of religion. The priesthood was reinstituted. The Bible was buried. There was a single translation by Jerome in Latin, and it too was buried. The only people who were allowed access to this new Latin Bible were clergy. The common person was forbidden to know their own scriptures because buried in the scriptures was the concept that this religion was unnecessary. And this went on. There were protesters really immediately who had copies of these early scriptures and said, wait a minute, there's no such thing as purgatory. There's no need for a priesthood. We're not supposed to speak to the dead. We're not supposed to pray to angels. We're not supposed to venerate Mary any more than her being the blessed mother of Jesus, and not to give her status as co-redemptrix or co-mediatrix, as Rome does. And these people were immediately suppressed, brutally so, from the Donatists in early and North Africa, all the way through to the Valdensians and Albigensians in northern Italy and southern France. As a matter of fact, one of the first crusades, actually within 200 years, first crusades were at Pope Urban, the first crusade around, 1000 AD. By 1200 AD, Innocent III was anything but actually commenced a crusade against Christians. And this is a fact that has been erased by history, that you had these we have this image of these brave soldiers, these brave warriors in their white cloaks and red crosses, battling with this impressive Muslim enemy, and sometimes winning, sometimes losing. But there's another crusade that is little known of these same brave warriors slaughtering women and children simply because they were Bible-believing Christians. And these protesters continue to hide out and suffer. Particularly the Waldensians actually used the Alps as their only defense to make it difficult for them to be tracked down. It wasn't until the advent of guys like Jan Hus in Bohemia and Czechoslovakia that Roman priests who had access to the Bible, who read the Bible for themselves, started to say, wait a minute, these things don't make any sense. You have an entire power structure that is unnecessary, that's obsolete, that Christ rendered obsolete on the cross.
What happened to them if that's happening internally?
They were executed. Jan Hus.
That's what I assumed, but I thought might as well get clarity.
Yeah, they were executed. Jan Hus, as a matter of fact, Jan Hus was tricked into having a diet with Inquisition authorities. As one of the things, Innocent III was also one of the founders of the Inquisition, and the purpose of the Inquisition was to kill Christians. They also ended up killing Muslims and Jews in the Inquisition, but their main target were Bible-believing Christians because they were the most dangerous. The ones who had access to showing how this power structure was unnecessary, a power structure that claimed to have its basis on the Christian belief system, and yet was fraudulent and unnecessary. Those were the most dangerous, and therefore they were the most persecuted. Jan Hus was tricked into he was given a guarantee of safe passage into his diet with the Inquisition authorities, and after they got him, they revoked the safe passage, arrested him, and burned him alive. And he actually mentioned Hus in Bohemian, the Bohemian tongue actually means goose. And there's this story that's really wonderful that his executioner mocked him on the gallows and said, now we will cook this goose. And Hus is reputed to have replied, in 100 years, a swan will fly higher than you can ever reach. And 102 years later, an Augustinian monk named Martin Luther was so repulsed by abuses of Catholic authorities that he wrote out a document against them and posted them on the doors of All Saints Cathedral in Wittenberg in Germany. And we're coming up on the 500th anniversary. That'll November 1st, 2017 will be 500 years of Augustinian monk Martin Luther doing that. And what he did, the popes were just tremendously corrupt. They lived like kings and acted like kings. They named themselves. The whole purpose of popes renaming themselves.
You said were, like it was past tense.
No, continue. Well, they were. It's much more difficult to pin down certainly high clergy with crimes, and yet low clergy in the Catholic Church, the problem with pedophilia is sickening and endemic, absolutely endemic. And not to get sidetracked, and we can go into this, but it is beyond criminal. I recommend the movie Spotlight with Michael Keaton, Liev Schreiber, some other folks in there. Great movie. The dude that played Hulk in the Avengers movies. Good movie that talks about one diocese in Boston, the Boston Diocese, that had 200 incidents of pedophilia by priests over a couple decades. Are you kidding me? And the unbelievable crimes that occurred by the hierarchy as soon as they realized that they had priests violating and raping small children, they covered up, protected those priests, and moved them to a new diocese where they could pray again and again and again on these children. It's monstrous, almost as if their intent was to cause as many victims of American children as possible. And I honestly believe that.
It was continuous. It wasn't like they just moved them and then
to this day.
It just
To this
continued.
day, you bet. So evil beyond measure. Now, back in the day, this behavior was openly conducted by popes. The Pope Leo X.
Just before you go on, you've just said openly conducted. Now, given the current state of our news, that's quite interesting terminology. What do you mean by openly?
I mean, for instance, the names that people should know who rule the world behind the scenes are not Rothschild, Rockefeller, Soros. Those are important names to know, but they're middlemen. As powerful and as wealthy as the Rothschilds are, the Encyclopedia Judaica said they're nothing more than the keepers of the Vatican treasure. And they absolutely are. The real names of power are the so-called black nobility: de Medici, Farnese, Orsini. Tom Cruise, you know, Tom Cruise got married in an Orsini castle. He's reputed to be a Knight of Malta. Still, my point of bringing it up is to show that they still pull the strings to this day. Farnese, Borgia, Aldobrandini, Colonna. These are names that are not only incredibly powerful, but many of them have been popes: Farnese, Borgia, de Medici. And so I bring that up because it was a de Medici that was Pope Leo X, in 1517. And when I say we're conducting this licentious behavior openly, for instance, prostitution, I have a reference. I have two books out: Illuminati Unmasked and Secret History. And I think I just put it in my second book, just recently out, Secret History, that he would throw these parties and he'd have young naked boys pop out of the dessert. So that's what I mean when I say they did these perversions openly. Martin Luther, when he was still a practicing Augustinian monk, was given a special mission by his order to travel to Rome. And when he visited Rome, he was shocked. They actually had special brothels just for clergy. He could not believe the depth of depravity. There are, I have listed many examples of these popes, and I think when Giovanni de Medici was made pope by his family, a very wealthy family. Quick aside, the masters of banking were not the Jews. The Jews were put in as masters of banking. The masters of banking, the first bankers were the Templars. And the real masters of the banking were families like the Medici. And the very term bank comes from the Italian banco, from the counter over which the Medicis conduct their business. So
you Lorenzo, mean like literal physical countertop is called the bank?
Back in the day, the countertop that they conduct their business was banco in Italian.
I did not know that.
And that is where the term bank is derived from. As a quick aside, the Templars were knights in the service of the papacy. And if anyone wants to continue to trace themselves and say, oh, yes, we have the Templar tradition, well, that means you serve the Pope. They always have been. And they pretty much were suppressed and went underground. There's not they don't have a power structure. They have offspring. The Knights of Malta and the Jesuits carry on their traditions. But the Templars really created usury banking, because that in part of Roman Catholic tradition, you had what's the word I'm looking for? Where religious adherents would travel to a sacred site, pilgrimage. You would have pilgrimages to the Holy Land. Well, Bible-believing Catholics don't subscribe to pilgrimages. We know that Christ puts the center of communicating with him in us. We don't have to go to a sacred site, but that's part of a deep and pagan ritual system. If you really want to make yourself right with God, you have to show him and prove him, have a pilgrimage to a special sacred site. So we had pilgrimages to the Holy Land, and is the birth of Islam around 600 AD. Soon you had a Muslim caliphate that had control of the quote unquote the Holy Land, and began to close off these sacred sites to Christian pilgrims. And that was part of what instituted the reason behind Urban conducting the crusade, the first crusade, and the following crusade, several afterwards, to regain the Holy Land, which is absolutely unchristian. There's no need for it. So
there's now Israel.
It's what is now Israel, absolutely, and that's a whole nother topic that we can hit. But the Templars were there, actively trying to regain the Holy Land and to protect these Christian pilgrims. Well, Christian pilgrims didn't want to get robbed. They had a lot of brigands in this area, and so they would turn in their valuables to these Templars, and the Templars were experts in intelligence gathering and Gnostic beliefs, and so they would take these valuables, and they actually had a system of ciphers. They had a special code. They would give that traveler a receipt with a special code that can only be read by another Templar. And you could take that receipt and for a fee, turn that receipt in and regain your valuables. That fee was usury, and this eventually ended up becoming modern usury banking. The Templars invented banking, not the Jews. As a quick aside, the Roman Catholic Church owned royalty within a very brief time. I mean, you could say Roman Catholic Church was established certainly by 500 AD, absolutely by the time of 538 AD, when Justinian proclaimed.
But it seems that way to this day. I mean, the Queen still wears those emblems and symbols on her garb to this day.
Well done, you. Who knows that those crosses and those symbols trace back to service to the Pope? The Maltese cross, not a Christian cross, but it absolutely is the symbol of a Roman Catholic knight. It's actually an ancient Gnostic symbol, in the same way that the swastika and the six-pointed so-called Star of David are ancient Gnostic symbols. Oh, and by the way, so is the eight-pointed star that is venerated in Islam, also a Gnostic symbol that is venerated by these secret cabal really, I call them Luciferians, because they do worship Lucifer. I, as a Christian, call him Satan, but they call him Lucifer, the bearer of light, poor Prometheus that simply wanted to make things better for people, and by giving them knowledge, secret knowledge, and as a result was punished by the gods. So in the 1300s, in Rome owned royalty. You could not, Henry VIII couldn't even get a divorce unless he had the permission of the Pope. So you had, and this issue, for instance, it's known as investiture. And Rome had a system of subversives and emissaries. Roman Catholic clergy, this is also a problem to this day. When you have not just clergy, but devout Catholic laity, who is their loyalty to? Their loyalty is to Rome. And if Rome tells them to do something that's not in the best interest of their nation, they will do it if they're devout enough. This issue,
and that loyalty is called investiture.
No. Investiture was a problem that many royals had in dealing with these cardinals and bishops. Cardinals and bishops were like landed gentry. They were like lords, and as a matter of fact, on purpose. It was, when you're a royal, the most important thing to you is staying in power. And in order to stay in power, you want to surround yourself with allies. And if you don't have allies, you need to make allies. So one of the ways you do that is to give someone land and a title. But if you've run out of land, go ahead.
No, I follow you now. I didn't follow you now. I do.
And I'm still fleshing that out for you. If you run out of land and titles, then you've got a problem. Well, you have in every nation, England, Germany, Spain, France, Italy, Portugal, you have an aristocracy within your aristocracy. It is the Roman Catholic clergy. Even though these people are born in your nation, some of them are, some of them aren't. They are basically an opposing army. And so as a sovereign attempted to shore up his power, or her power, she wanted to make sure that as these cardinal sees and bishoprics became open and available, that they put their own allies in these powerful positions. They did not have the power to do that. They would make suggestions, but many times their suggestions were overridden by the Pope, who decided, no, I'm going to put this person there. And very often these people were not even natural born. They were foreigners. And so they had even less reason to be loyal to the sovereign. And so that is what is known as investiture controversy, is that you had royals trying to put allies in powerful positions, cardinal sees and bishoprics, and not being allowed to. This happened to Prince John Lackland. This happened to his father, Henry II, the source of many controversies throughout history. So you have this tremendous power that sits in Rome that controlled whole nations, even though there was no military. And this the key to this started with the Crusades. Urban realized that he had the power, and subsequent popes had the power simply by their status as the so-called vicar of Christ on earth. They didn't have to use their own. They don't have to raise their own military. They used the military of other nations who were loyal Roman Catholics. And so that's what makes the Holy Roman Empire. I know that traditionally it has a very specific historical and geographical definition, but I use it in the broad sense of the term, is a different empire altogether, uses other nations' powers, militaries, intelligence agencies. And so there's only one king that I know of in my research that has ever rebelled, and that was Philippe le Bel, Philippe the Fair, Philip IV of France. Philippe le Bel took advantage of some confusion over papal elections, and actually had the papacy moved to Avignon, and was there for about 70 years. And while the papacy was in Avignon, for the first time that I know of, before and since, you had a royal that actually had control over Rome rather than vice versa. Well, Philippe also realized that the power wasn't just in the person of the Pope. The power was in his knight servants. And at the time, it was the Templars. And the Templars were shockingly powerful. The Templars had more wealth than most nations in their day at that time. And so Philippe said, listen, I'm an ambitious guy. I have some control. I want all control. And so he took advantage of rumors that the Templars spat on the cross and conducted weird sexual rituals. And honestly, there's controversy whether or not this is true or false. I'm convinced that any powerful secret society conducts these rituals at the very top. So that there had to have been some level of truth. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to sell this. And he had Clement V, who was in his pocket, order the suppression of the Templars in 1307 on unlucky Friday, October the 13th, 1307. And so they hunted down the Templars, tortured them for information, and had most of them killed, but many of them went underground. And I'm also convinced that they ended up in Switzerland And that's why you see that's what this Swiss banking that no one's allowed to touch. Why the Pope's guard is a Swiss guard. That's what's left of the Templars.
Right. So they have immunity because they've got as long a history as.
You bet. They have the power. They have the immunity because they have the power, and their power runs deep in history. So, with Jacques de Molay was their general at the time, their Grand Master. He was captured and tortured for information, and eventually executed. And so they realized the people at the top, the people in Rome, and eventually returned. The Vatican eventually returned to Rome, and the power brokers realized, hey, we can never again conduct our agenda, our machinations with our own names and faces so visible. We have to have patsies and scapegoats. And it was with the suppression of the Templars that they learned to start using the Jews as patsies. And that's why we see so many Jewish names and faces. How much do you think Mark Zuckerberg is really the man behind Facebook? Is he the man behind Facebook, or is he the face behind Facebook? That's an example of a countless
face. There's no doubt.
He's just a face, and he's clear. And anybody that knows any research is clear. He's a puppet. He's a puppet. They take these people and put them in positions of power. And the sick part about this relationship is they will always find Jews willing to betray their own people, willing to be targets for our anger and our ire in order to make sure that we're going out for the wrong target. Yes, they're partly responsible, just as the Freemasons are partly responsible. Not when I say they, and I want to be very, very clear. People who paint all Jews with a blanket brush are either diseased or part of the problem. You have a set number of people that happen to have Jewish lineage at the top. The solution to that is not another Holocaust. The solution, as a matter of fact, I have a tremendous amount of information on how the Vatican and the Jesuits created the Third Reich as part of this agenda, and transferred it to America to become the Fourth Reich. But this struggle for power is what was present with the suppression of the Templars, and then on into the 1400s and 1500s. And so you had these renegade protesters, Jan Hus and the Valdenses and the Albigenses, and oh my goodness, I'm trying to remember some other pre-Reformation martyrs. It'll come to me later, but they had access to the scriptures in their own tongue. And a great example is John Wycliffe Wycliffe. I want to say also, let me take a look just to get an idea of his time period. Bear with me. So I'm dealing with exact dates here. Wycliffe is, 1300s. I knew it was the same time period as suppression. 1300s. Wycliffe lived 1320 to 1384. Again, a Roman Catholic priest who had access to the scriptures and was shocked at the abuse of clergy in ways that were very, very un-Christian and unscriptural. And so John Wycliffe, brilliant man, professor at Oxford, began to just show up some of these abuses of power and authority by his own hierarchy. He had followers who adored him, and they would hand copy Bibles into English. They were known as Lollards. And they would take these hand copied Bibles and spread them. Wycliffe was an Englishman, spread them all over the English countryside. Well, this was extremely dangerous. And as a result, Wycliffe's Lollards and their hand copied Bibles were taken in by Catholic authorities, and they were burned. The Bibles were burned. As a matter of fact, the Bibles were tied around the necks of the Lollards, and then they were burned alive. And it was a terrible, terrible loss, because it would take, months upon months upon months to hand copy these Bibles. And so it was a very powerful counter to people becoming aware of what it really means to be a Christian, and how the Roman Catholic hierarchy were doing a lot of very unchristian things. All you had to do was burn the evidence, burn the person and the scripture, the documents itself. This worked until 1487, I want to say, the advent of the movable type printing press, which was really put well into practice by Johannes Gutenberg in Germany. Johannes Gutenberg, prior to that, the printing press, you had to carve out in wood a master for every sheet. And of course, this takes a ridiculous amount of time. Well, you now had, with the movable type printing press, you take individual characters and put them in holders, and you build each sheet individually, and it dramatically reduced the amount of time to print something. So
one of those things that can't be understated, really, because it's one of the biggest turning points in history. It's like the telephone or something else.
And now information is made much more available to the common person. It was a tremendous blow to the aristocracy that had a single hold on information and knowledge. So you had people like Medici living. He was, I think he was actually bedridden with syphilis when he was made pope. He wasn't even a priest. That was done as an afterthought, because his father was was literally Lorenzo the Great Medici, who installed him first as a bishop, then as a cardinal. As a matter of fact, he was so young as a cardinal, he was not allowed to participate in the College of Cardinals because he was too young. He's like 14. And so talk about a corrupt system. So Medici lived like a king and spent money like water, and had eventually bankrupted the entire Catholic religion. And so people were starting.
Wow, that's a big statement. That's a huge amount of money.
Oh yeah. Oh, he's running out of funds. It's not an exaggeration to say that Pope Leo X, Giovanni de' Medici, spent himself out of wealth. So that make that very specific, and that is accurate. He needed a new way to bring in wealth, and royals were starting to get wise to this idea of calling up another crusade, because it became a dodge. Popes would demand funds for a crusade, and then the crusade would never appear, and the Pope would spend the money, the wealth. And so rather than command another crusade, the Medici Pope said, you know what? St. Peter's here is in disrepair. I have a master plan to rebuild St. Peter's, and it includes Michelangelo Buonarroti, Raphael. As a matter of fact, Michelangelo actually spent time with the de Medicis. He was conscripted by the de Medici family before this occurred. So he said, I'm going to use my connections, and I'm going to just rebuild St. Peter's in a way that's just stunning. Now, again, very, very unchristian. Bible-believing Christians believe that Christ on the cross did away with sacred sites. There's now no longer a need for a massive gold inlaid sacred site. It's absolutely obsolete. We carry around our salvation and our communication individually. In fact, there's passages in Scripture where it explains that each individual believer is now a brick in the new temple. We make up the new temple. So it's absolutely obsolete. But that was a dodge that was used against people that were ignorant of what the Bible actually said. So how do you bring in money and this cost billions. Nathan, without exaggeration, what the renovation of St. Peter's was billions. And as a quick aside, absolutely pagan. There is a mirror image of St. Peter's in another sovereign city-state, Washington, D.C. In St. Peter's Square, you have a sunburst for Chaldean sun worship, and in the center of that sunburst is an Egyptian obelisk representing the phallus of Osiris. And across from the phallus of Osiris is the dome of St. Peter's, which represents the womb of Isis. You have the exact same layout in Washington, District of Columbia. A massive phallus, misnamed the Washington Monument, across from the Capitol OL Rotunda, which is the womb of Isis. And it was so clearly Roman that Washington, D.C. was called Rome, Little Rome on the Tiber. And then eventually it was renamed Little Rome on the Potomac. And then eventually it was just erased as being this spit mirror image of Rome, of the Vatican. So back to Medici, he needed money for the renovation of this very pagan institution. And he exploited his position as the vicar of Christ, and he exploited the ignorance of good followers, of good peasants, Catholic peasants, and used their fear of sin and damnation against them. He instituted a sin tax, and he instituted indulgences, which were payment for sin. He sent around hucksters and used car salesmen. At that time, his most vicious order were the Dominicans. And he sent around Dominicans. They were actually kicked out of most countries because most sovereigns will not allow their people to be subjected to this. I mean, like really Catholic nations, France, Spain, England, kicked them out. Unfortunately, Germany was the center of what was then the so-called Holy Roman Empire. And the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire was based in Germany, even though he himself was not a German at the time, was Charles V. And Charles V, what was Charles? He was not German. I want to say he was Belgian. What was he? Anyway, I'll cut through it. It was, I think it was French. Yeah, from the house of Valois Burgundy, which is actually from the Netherlands. So this is what they love to do this, by the way. They love to put people in power that have no loyalty to the people they're in control. They love to have outsiders be installed. And then again, we go back to this idea of investiture. And particularly in England, where you have the Archbishop of Canterbury as the most powerful position. And very, very frequently, not just we had these people installed that were loyal to Rome, they weren't even English. Which ensured that they would be emissaries and subversives of the papacy and against the best interests of the royal. So you had these Dominicans going around and tricking the people out of fear, using literal parlor tricks with fire and like a play they would put on to frighten people about not just about their own souls, but also about the souls of departed loved ones. You had a very high infant mortality rate at this time in history.
Wow, this all sounds so familiar. So you've got pyrotechnics and pilgrimages and children dying. I mean, you could transpose that over to today, literally.
It is sickeningly, shockingly pertinent to today. Sickeningly, shockingly pertinent. And children being used as they're being used today. We have a corrupt, evil, vicious system that lives on the bodies of children, used as sex slaves and as sacrifices. And so you had these hucksters, these snake oil salesmen going around and scaring good, ignorant Catholic peasants and saying, we know that you've lost your baby girl. Your baby girl is in purgatory, an institution that has no basis in Scripture, by the way. If you really love your baby girl, you'll give me a year's salary, and I'll give you this sheet of paper that guarantees the Pope will pray your baby girl out of purgatory. She'll be released and to go to heaven. And really, really that sick. That sick. As a matter of fact, it was as a result of catching wind to this that the Augustinian monk named Martin Luther was so outraged at the antics of these Dominicans, particularly Dominican by the name of Johann Tetzel, who was putting on these shows and bilking good ignorant peasants out of money they could not afford to lose. And in outrage, he wrote basically a treatise that had some like 95 paragraphs that were like bullet comments, and it became known as the 95 Theses, and each and every one was based on the outrage of the indulgences of cheating good ignorant peasants out of their hard-earned money just to line the coffers of the Medici Pope. Now, interestingly enough, Martin Luther didn't even attack Leo X. He gave Leo X a pass and said, listen, I know that you're ignorant of this terrible abuse, and when you find out, you'll put your foot down. But I'm sure he was much more cynical than that. And it was also as a result of him being a priest and having access to the scriptures. Well, this started quite a ripple, and it was a result of the movable type printing press that people who loved Martin Luther as a rebel, we all have that one or two, that professor, who was actually a professor at the University of Wittenberg. We all have that fond memory of that one teacher that didn't fit in, was a true nonconformist, was like to rock the boat. Well, he had students that loved him, and he originally had posted 95 Theses in Latin. The doors of All Saints Cathedral in Wittenberg was really like a bulletin board, so it was really nothing that dramatic about it. When they caught wind of their beloved professor blasting this corruption and abuse in Latin, they stole it, they translated it into German, and they gave it to these publishers, these printers, and it papered the countryside. He eventually he was a couple of different ways he could have gone with this. He could have immediately denied what he had said. He could have tempered it, but instead he embraced it. It was not his intent to have it blow up, but once it did blow up, he was a man of courage, and he stepped up and said, it's right. It is an abuse, and there are people being victimized by this abuse, and I absolutely stand by it. He eventually did send copies to his own clergy in Germany and send copies to Rome. Unfortunately, they beat him there because of the how fast the movable type printing press was now working. As a matter of fact, I think the Gutenberg's press was Gutenberg was operating no more than 50 kilometers from Wittenberg. Just an amazing coincidence of time in history, 1487 to 1517. So he immediately was reproached by his hierarchy, who had some serious concerns about this, and obviously so they would, because he threatened the power structure. So they examined him at Augsburg. Cardinal Cajetan examined him at Augsburg, and he was scared. He went in and he prostrated himself laid face down. And yet, when he was questioned, he said, listen, my Lord, my Cardinal, I did not have a desire to cause dramatic problems, but I do ask that you reference scripture and just show me where I'm wrong. And Cajetan was furious. I'm going to tell you you're wrong, and I'm going to command you revoco. You will recant what you have said and done, and that'll be the end of it. I'm not going to bandy words with you. And Martin Luther was a stubborn ass, and the last thing he needed to be said was, I don't need to prove to you that you're wrong. He actually had some disciplinary understanding. He started off as a lawyer. His father bankrupted the family to make him a lawyer, and he infuriated his father by becoming a monk instead. So he had a legal background, and so he had, back in the day, this is known as humanism, the idea that you don't just do on the whims of a human being, you nail it down to a specific document because the whims and understandings of human beings change and can be abused. We now call this the rule of law. When you nail someone down, by the way, England and Germany took point on the idea of a constitutional monarchy, that the very monarch themselves was still responsible to a document over and above their own power. And this is based in Christian tradition, the idea that the sovereign is not God on earth, that the sovereign himself or herself actually answers to a higher authority and is responsible for doing the right thing. So Augsburg ended, and Martin Luther was intended to be reconciled, and instead he dug his heels in. So this snowballed and got worse, and another diet was called at Worms, and is known as the Diet of Worms by those who don't pronounce it properly, where he was again, but this time more professionally examined by the Inquisition. And he started off again very scared. He actually went in, and he wasn't going to go, and then Charles V gave him a safe passage. And 100 years prior, Jan Hus had been given a safe passage by the Holy Roman Emperor, and he would have been arrested and murdered. So he didn't even receive the safe passage at the time. He was promised a safe passage. This was also, interestingly, in the exact time of peasant upheavals, because peasants were just tired of being used. And so you had
a more professional Inquisition, which sounds pretty terrifying. I mean,
This is the power of the world, and they have the power to, when the trial is done, take you outside and burn you alive. And so it absolutely was a terrifying thing to undergo. And so when he was found, and Charles V was there in person, you had an inquisitional tribunal with the emperor in front of you. And so the first day he said, can I have a day to think about this? And they were like, well, what did you think we called you for? Why don't you have your answer ready? Amazingly enough, Cajetan and Charles granted him a day. And it was like the worst thing they could have ever done. He went in, he collected his thoughts, he got right with who he knew was his commander-in-chief, and he came back at the Diet of Worms and blasted the Catholic clergy for these corruptions, the indulgences. Now, they laid in front of him, he was a copious writer. He wrote libraries, and he was very precise. He said, listen, some of these things are personal attacks I wrote out of anger. Some of these things are expositions on the Bible that even my enemies acknowledge are good writings. And some of these things are exposés of corruption. These I stand by, and I ask to be shown how I'm wrong by Scripture. And otherwise, here I stand. I can do no other. And it was the second shot heard around the world. Well, he had a benefactor, an elector named Frederick of Saxony. Electors were like a Republican college that helped to put the emperor in power. So electors were very, very powerful. Frederick liked his upstart monk. And it was after Worms that even his own superior cut him loose. He couldn't take the heat. So he was no longer an Augustinian, but he was still a priest. And so, but Frederick III, and there is a story that's recounted in documents, how Frederick had a weird dream that scared him, that said that an upstart with a pen was going to have that write in such a way that the pen would grow to pierce the ear of a lion in Rome, and that Frederick himself and all of his aristocrats would try to break the pen, and it would become like an iron bar that they could not break. And it scared him. And within a day of having this dream, he was brought to this controversy in regards to his own monk, his own priest. Martin Luther in his own diocese there. And so he had a connection to Martin Luther that Charles V at that time was young. I think he was only 25. And so he just wanted to appease Rome. He wanted to stay in power. Like all sovereigns, he just wanted stability. But Frederick was subtly working in the background to support Martin Luther. As a matter of fact, he had a jester that I think his jester's name was Fritz. And at the Diet of Worms, he had Fritz mock the cardinals with their pomp. And it was kind of showed where he stood. He got into Charles's ear, and actually the safe conduct arrived. And that's probably part of what bolstered Luther's courage to take the stand that he did, that he had the safe conduct, even if there was a chance it could be revoked. And he took a stand. Well, after Worms, and something else that happened that same night, by the way, I think it was like April 17, 18, 19, what was this, 15, 22, 23. That same night, a threat was made, 1521. A threat was made against the people in the Inquisition. A placard of a peasant's shoe was posted outside the courthouse. Well, what that meant, it was the sign of the Bundschuh. The Bundschuh was a peasant rebellion that had spread across. It'd be like using a Guy Fawkes mask. And oh my goodness, a Guy Fawkes mask come right from the Jesuits. Doesn't mean what people think it means today. But anyway, it was a threat. Say, hey, we love our priest. You touch our monk, and bad things are going to happen. So as a result, they honored the safe passage. And after the Diet of Worms, Martin Luther.
I've got to ask this. I'm really sorry to interrupt. So there's a plaque of a shoe that represents that. That seems a bit crazy. That needs a bit of explanation, just because it's a bit out there.
Yeah, it was part of the Bundschuh rebellion, the peasant rebellion. Look, peasants were always unhappy with being used by the aristocracy. That's forever. That's a part of feudalism and a part of human existence. But there are times when it gets so bad that they begin to rebel and revolt. And at this time in 1521, the Bundschuh movement was a revolt of peasants that threatened to overturn the feudalistic hierarchy of the entire empire, but particularly there in Germany. And so this was a threat made by secret cells of the Bundschuh rebels. And they posted this placard of a shoe saying, hey, you touch our priest and there'll be blood as a result. And it's just amazing, again, an amazing coincidence of these factors of history coming together at this time. We Christians feel that it's not coincidence. But anyway, after the Diet of Worms, Luther never made it back to Wittenberg. He was kidnapped. Fortunately for him, he was kidnapped by his own benefactor, Frederick the Wise, Frederick the Great, who said, you know what, this guy is dynamite. There's no way we're going to let this guy loose, because there actually were plots to have him assassinated. Not only that, but after the Diet of Worms, Charles V condemned him and anyone who supported him, and said they're criminals within the empire. Not only would they be executed, turned over to the Inquisition, but their property would be taken from them. Their wealth would be taken from them. And it's amazing that Luther lived to a ripe old age, a sign of his popularity with the people, because he was condemned after Worms by the emperor himself, and yet they never executed him because they were afraid of the people. And so Frederick didn't let it get that far. He kidnapped Luther and put him up at Wartburg Castle. And he became a different person. He became Knight Sir George, Junker Jorg. And the problem was that while he was being safe and incognito, he had nothing to do, and it drove him crazy. Well, a humanist by the name of Desiderius Erasmus, who was also a Roman Catholic priest, but an honest one, had created some manuscripts based on the original Greek and Hebrew, and not Jerome's Latin Vulgate. And as an honest linguist, he found that there were some serious problems even within the Vulgate. And he was a supporter of Martin Luther, but he wouldn't go as far as Luther's revolutions with the Roman Church. So he was kind of like a fence sitter. What Luther did was he asked Frederick for some help. Give me something to do. Get me some of Erasmus's manuscripts, and I will start to translate the Bible for the German people. And that's exactly what he did. It was probably the most important thing of his life. He spent that time at Wartburg translating the New Testament into vernacular German. He was so intent to make it readable to the common person, he would sneak out at night and listen to the conversations as this mysterious Sir George, just to make sure he got vernacular German correct. Translated the Bible from the Erasmus manuscripts from the Greek and the Hebrew, and that went again to the Gutenberg press, the movable type printing press. And this was what started the reason why we're talking, Nathan. Once you take this book, so you have an organization who say they are Christian, they have a massive power structure that relies on ignorance that is actually not really Christian. They have a hierarchy reinstalled of clergy that is unnecessary. This book that is the constitution of the Christian religion, that Christians can draw their beliefs from outside of the variation of human opinion, is now the most dangerous thing ever for this organization.
Well, at this stage, though, am I right in saying, you have to excuse my ignorance if I am completely wrong about this, but the book that most people are presented with is kind of, it's been spun out of all, we're right up to the point where we've got Tyndale actually kind of going back and making the translations a bit more accurate rather than the kind of spin that everyone's presented with by the bishop.
Well, that is why it was important for Erasmus to use that as the Greek and Hebrew manuscripts that were dated, rather than
going back to the original.
Right. Rather than Jerome's Latin Vulgate that had some inaccuracies and some concerns with it. For instance, the modern Jesuit written Roman Catholic Bible, the Douay Rheims, still has those inaccuracies. For instance, in Genesis chapter 3, when it talks about the curse and the promise of what happened with the fall of mankind in the Garden of Eden, where it says that cursed is Eve and her offspring, and Eve will bear the seed of promise, and that seed of promise will be bruised on the heel by the serpent, and that seed of promise will bruise the serpent's head, will crush the serpent's head. This is actually the first prophecy of the Messiah, because there is no such thing as a seed of the woman. It's physically impossible. It is a hint at the virgin birth of the Messiah, and the Douay Rheims, the Catholic Bible, actually changes that and makes Mary the one who crushes the head of the serpent. So these are some of the inaccuracies that, unfortunately, today, those same inaccuracies have now been written back into modern translations, where you have all kinds of crazy things that have been abused. And so I school fellow Christians. I tell them, look, don't stick to one particular translation. The King James translation is based upon the manuscripts that are known as the Textus Receptus, the received text. Pretty solid group of manuscripts, pretty good translation. Unfortunately, the old King James, tough to read unless you're an expert in Shakespeare. And oh, by the way, Francis Bacon, who was almost certainly William Shakespeare, was also the guy that edited the King James Bible for James I. Another story.
I mean, we're at the point in history, though. We're about an hour in, maybe a bit more now, where we're right on the edge of the beginning of the heliocentric deception.
We can now explain.
We've got. I mean, I didn't want to interrupt any of that because that is all new information to me. Well, 99% of it, and it is fascinating because we're now at that point where anybody who's had a lot of the information that you may go through now with Tycho Brahe and so on, that they probably haven't had that, you know, pre 500 years leading up to this point, and it is truly fascinating.
It's been purposely erased from history, and this is why. With the advent of the movable type press, the fires of the Inquisition could no longer keep up with the Bibles being printed. In the time of Wycliffe, God bless him, who was actually thrown out of Oxford by the open-minded Catholic hierarchy leaders in Oxford. Imagine that, the brilliance of John Wycliffe, thrown out of Oxford. You could cope with Wycliffe and his Lollard followers by burning their hand-copied Bibles and devastating the attempt to disseminate the Bible amongst the common people. But with guys like Martin Luther and later on William Tyndale bravely translating the Bible into the common tongue and then having it sent to these printers, now you had too many Bibles covering the countryside. Rome had a serious problem. So the 1517 was the 95 Theses on All Saints Cathedral in Wittenberg. In the 1520s, you had a young Spanish Basque noble getting wounded at the Battle of Pamplona. And Pamplona, I want to say, was 15. Battle of Pamplona was 1521. The same the same year as Worms. So the Battle of Pamplona between Spain and France wounded a young knight named Ignacio Lopez, and devastated one of his legs was broken so badly it had to be reset and then reset again. And he did this without anesthetic. It was done to him without anesthetic. Just brutal, very, very painful. He was devastated. He had these visions as a result of his pain. And you can imagine, certainly he had visions of the Virgin Mary and the infant Jesus. And he rededicated his life to become not a soldier for himself, but a soldier for Mary and Christ and Rome, and probably in that order too. He decided he was going to personally re-win back the Promised Land for the Pope, and he was also going to crush this new Reformation. Well, he gathered together some friends. He ended up going to Paris to learn Latin in his new agenda, his new mission. And there in Paris, he got together some supporters, Peter Faber and Francis Xavier. And in 1534, they instituted the Knights of the Virgin Mary, and with this agenda to crush this Reformation. In 1540, he stood before the Pope himself, Pope Paul III, and Paul III consecrated this order and gave it a more broad name. The Society of Jesus had a much better feel that way. So the Society of Jesus became the most dedicated. Now, as a result of Ignacio Lopez as a noble is better known as Ignatius de Loyola. And de Loyola, as a result of his own personal journey, roughly around the same time, Martin Luther went through this period of trying to make himself right before God. And he was tortured by the idea that God was perfect and he could never be perfect. And it wasn't until he had a breakthrough in his personal faith, particularly from reading the book of Romans and the book of Hosea, that talks about you can never be righteous before a perfect God. What you must do is rely on grace. By grace you are saved, and this is not of yourself, it's a free gift. And this is a breakthrough for Martin Luther, where he really tortured himself to earn his salvation. And then he had this breakthrough. I can never earn it. It can never be earned. I have to go through life as a humble sinner and rely on the grace of Christ himself. Loyola never learned that. Loyola continued to work himself, and he brutalized himself. He went into a cave outside, I believe it was Montserrat. He placed his sword before the Black Madonna of Montserrat, very pagan, not very Christian at all, to dedicate his life to Mary and to the papacy. And then he put himself in a cave and brutalized himself, beat his flesh, starved himself, meditated to the point where he hypnotized himself. He came up with what is known as the spiritual exercises, the absolute destruction of individuality, to make himself an unstoppable smart weapon to be used by who he hoped was God and God's representative on earth, the Pope. Fortunately, it just didn't turn out that way. But that's the spiritual exercises. To give you an example of what they are today, the United States Marine Corps boot camp is based upon Ignatian spiritual exercises, the total destruction of self, so that you can remold the individual into a smart weapon. And that's exactly that. It is a perfect analogy. The average, and I'm speaking from experience, I've earned the title of United States Marine. From Marine to Jesuit, they are the same in their dedication. And that's why Marines are so renowned as for their prowess on the battlefield. They have been destroyed in self. Their self has been taken out, and now they are the best smart weapon you could have, and that's what you have in the Jesuits. Well, so here's the problem: they could not stamp out the promulgation of the Bible, and so what they did was a brilliant plan to alter reality to discredit the Bible. This could be traced back to, oh my goodness, it was Wolsey, Thomas Wolsey, the Chancellor of the King himself in England, of Henry. And Wolsey called it learning against learning, to take the truth and weave lies into the truth so that you could cause people to question their own reality. You could cause people to now doubt what this Bible said, and you would force them to return to acknowledge Rome as their ultimate authority, both physically, politically, militarily, and spiritually. And this was the impetus for rewriting our reality. And then I go into great detail in the great video that we did with Mig, as well as my books, of explaining how Jesuits are at the forefront. Jesuits, the Vatican mathematician Nicholas Copernicus was the man who resuscitated the heliocentric idea of Pythagoras, who was venerated as one of the first Freemasons. And they use coincidence and optical illusion to start to bend our reality. The great example is, if you, what is a scientist? If you, and I love the way that that you guys, both you and Mig and Nora, now talk about scientism as a religion. And it absolutely is a religion, where we have priests that we give up our knowledge. We we accept whatever these priests tell us, and they use that and abuse that Einstein's theory of relativity is purposefully so complex that the layman can't understand it, because they want you to rely on your priests of scientism to know what your reality is. And they'll use optical not optical illusion, but just a coincidence of optics and vision. If you give up the idea that you are your own scientist, that you base your reality on your own observations, that you employ the scientific method, you make an observation, you create an hypothesis, you then try to break down your hypothesis and prove your hypothesis in an experiment in order to replicate your observation. You isolate the variables. And then if you're able to replicate what you have observed, chances are good that your hypothesis is accurate. You then turn this over to a peer of equal or better knowledge. They conduct same or similar experiments to verify, known as peer review, your observations and your hypotheses. If they concur, chances are good that your hypothesis is accurate. We as laymen don't do that. We as laymen rely on our priests of scientism to tell us what our reality is. You look up in the sky, and your observation is the sun and moon are the same size. The priest of scientism tells us it's just a coincidence. The sun is 400 times bigger than the moon, and just by coincidence, by optical illusion, happens to be exactly 400 times further away from us than the moon. Who are you going to believe? You're going to believe your own observations, or you're going to believe what the scientist, the priest of scientism tells you? Movement in the astral bodies. We're supposedly spinning at 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, moving at millions of miles an hour in the solar system, tens of millions of miles an hour in the galaxy, and hundreds of millions of miles an hour in the universe. And yet you look up at the North Star and it's right there. And there's no movement. What's going on? Why is all this movement and yet there's the North Stars right there? Oh, it's an optical illusion. It's a coincidence. It just so happens the North Star is so far away. We're really moving. It just appears that we're not moving. Who are you going to believe? You're going to believe your own observation, or you're going to believe the priest of scientism that tells you that? It has been a sick matrix of lies, started in Rome, and they actually covered their tracks. They had their mathematician, Nicholas Copernicus, write his seminal work that uses these optical illusions to recreate, to refabricate our reality. He was so afraid of what he did that he didn't want it published in his lifetime. Catholic authorities forced it to be printed because it was seminal, critical to their agenda of rewriting our reality, creating a matrix of lies to discredit the Bible. And De Revolutionibus, let me see if I can get this right. De Revolutionibus Orbium Celestium, on the revolutions of the heavenly bodies, used optical illusion to rewrite our reality and go from quote unquote geocentric to heliocentric. And if you are not your own scientist, it works. And that is true for the entire web matrix of lies. You have to accept what you're told by the priest of scientism about astronomy, about evolution. Evolution is doesn't even qualify as a hypothesis, as a verifiable hypothesis. It's not testable. It's not repeatable. It's not observable. The changing of one macro species into another macro species has never been replicated or observed. And yet it's taught with a white knuckle death grip in every school everywhere. That's the sick extent to how well the rewriting of our reality was done. And I can show you Jesuits in every corner. People are shocked to see how much there is Jesuit participation in archaeology, paleontology, astronomy. One of the first things the Jesuits did everywhere that they went was to become royal astronomers, to be the priests of scientism in that location. China, where they made their first breakthrough, Francis Xavier was one of the founders of the Jesuits. Never made it out of Japan. Wanted to go to China. Matteo Ricci was one of the first Jesuits, and immediately became the royal astronomer for the Emperor of China. Why? Because they wanted to be this priest of scientism, to tell the people what their reality, lie to them about what their reality was. And they continued to work this until we now accept this unbelievable lie as truth, because we don't verify it for ourselves. And that's one of the most awesome things about this movement, is it grew out of the idea of question authority. Question all authority. Question science, history, NASA, your college, your politics, your news media. They're all lying to you to enslave you. And it started in Rome, and that's who it answers to. And oh, by the way, we'll spend a few minutes when you want talking, and particularly in America, of how many people in America are Jesuit-trained Roman Catholics in key positions of power.
I mean, the only one you missed off that list for me was mathematics. I mean, that's one of the things that's been manipulated. I know Globebusters currently are pointing this out, that we use base 10. Well, that's not necessarily the best system for most applications that it's being used for, and there's a reason why we use it. It's been put in place to deceive, like everything.
As soon as you have a discipline that can rise above the common understanding, you have power over the people, and you abuse and exploit their ignorance. It goes right back to the birth of the Reformation, in this idea that people had to buy the souls of their dead children out of purgatory because they were ignorant of truth, of reality. That's not a Christian doctrine, and never was according to the Bible. Same thing about math.
Sure sounds profitable, though. Like I said earlier, we've got pilgrimages at the moment. The current pilgrimage is to Mars. That's our current pilgrimage that we're funding.
Nathan, it's as profitable as changing the data on global warming. It's as profitable as hoaxing paleontology. Are you kidding me? There are archaeological hoaxes. How can you ever be credited as true scientists anywhere when you have hoaxes or the purposeful changing of data to lie to the people about their reality? We should have had revolts instantly. And we're talking about the 1800s, when you have Piltdown Man, pardon me, being shown to have been a hoax of the so-called missing link. And you have now a Jesuit, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, is now known to have been one of the key perpetrators of that hoax. How are you kidding me?
So Piltdown Man was this so-called missing link where they had basically, I think it was under or oversized human skull with monkey teeth basically inserted into it.
It was there was a jawbone. Let me see if I can pull this up. It was a fabricated. Oh, and this is another part. Roman hierarchy are experts. Another very pagan doctrine is relics, and also a very profitable doctrine, relics. As a
These are under
result,
the altars of Catholic churches around the world, are they not?
everywhere there is not an antiquated cathedral, Anglican, Catholic, now unfortunately I'm sure Lutheran as well. There is not a cathedral anywhere that isn't built on bones. It is a very, very pagan. It is nothing Christian. There's nothing Christian about having a sacred site that you have to pilgrimage to, whether it's your church down the street, your cathedral down the street, or it's going to Jerusalem. It's still a pilgrimage. And building that cathedral, that massive stained glass cathedral, on the bones of someone that you venerate. There's nothing Christian about it. It is absolutely pagan, and it's a method of control. So you have these relics, because the relics are so profitable. It's a business. It was a literal business for the Roman Catholic Church. They began to fabricate relics and became experts in aging bones. This information was critical to these hoaxes, so that you now had, well, we can even go into the whole controversy over dinosaurs. Dinosaurs were absolutely unknown before the 1800s. That's because it was an agenda to help rewrite our reality being done by frauds. And all you need is a few frauds in the know at the top and a massive bureaucracy who buys into the lie. And it's that easy. You have good people out there in the desert looking up these bones that you may have planted there and absolutely believing what they found was millions and millions of years old because you made it look like that. And this was intricately part of these anthropological hoaxes. As soon as you had a single anthropological hoax, there should have been an uproar. You are scientists. You shouldn't be anywhere near giving out false data to lie to the people. What agenda could a scientist possibly have at falsifying the fossil record? Makes no sense unless it was part of this Jesuit Roman agenda to rewrite our reality, to enslave us, to discredit the Bible, and make us eventually subject back to Rome, which we're subject to Rome anyway, we just don't know it.
Right. So the profitable nature is always going to be key. And if you're the one dating the bones, you're the one who's got the price tag at your fingertips, I suppose.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what's worse, it is an insidious form of slavery, Nathan, because it's a mental slavery. We willingly put the chains on ourselves. It's much more serious than a physical slavery. A physical slave constantly seeks to free themselves. A mental slave doesn't know there is such a thing as freedom. And as a result, that's why the things that we do are so dangerous and so important, and why I'm concerned about agents of disinformation in our community, because we are dangerous to people who just all we're asking is be your own scientist. Question everything. As soon as someone why do you think doctors and lawyers use the language of Rome, Latin? Because they exploit their advantage of knowledge over you. If there's anytime someone has knowledge that I don't have, I do all I can to study up, to brush up, to learn their discipline, to see whether or not they're full of poop or not. Whether it's doctor, mechanic, computer repairman, lawyer, at the bare minimum, you can't know everything, but in regards to a particular problem you have, don't trust anyone that has knowledge you don't have. It's human nature. And that's what's so wonderful about this movement. Question everything. Politicians, NASA, scientists, educators, no one has a truly altruistic objective desire to give you the truth. Everyone has an angle. I have the angle of I just happen to believe that the truth serves my faith, my Christian faith, that by outing the truth, it bolsters my beliefs, and therefore I'm on board.
There's some nice examples out there of people in this particular arena, like Jaron of Jaronism, who say quite specifically, don't trust me, do your own research. And they're normally battling against people who are saying, trust this third party I have got this information from.
Well, I absolutely heartily approve of that. We have to be our own. I have a problem anytime in my house. I have a medical problem. My wife is studying medical disciplines. I immediately demand of her that she gives me information so that I'm not relying on a vet or a doctor or someone who is telling me something that just doesn't feel right with me. Chemotherapy creates almost as much cancer as it cures. That's a great example, and so much of it is terribly unnecessary. Wherever there is money or knowledge, there is corruption, and so absolutely recommend. Now, if you buy into my hypothesis, if you don't have to buy into it, you verify it. That's why I have 1,500 pages between the two books and 3,000 citations. In the end of every book, I have, if you get the digital version, the digital copy, they're hyperlinks. You go, turn this damn phone off. You go to the hyperlink and verify it yourself. Sorry.
Can you rattle off maybe the name of websites and give us your book titles and things?
Websites to use for this?
Yeah, just go through your regular. I don't know if you go through like a regular plug that you just name off your books and things.
Oh my, yeah, sure. JohnnyCirucci.com, JohnnyCirucci, JohnnyCirucci.com. Illuminati Unmasked was the first book. Secret History was the second book. They're both available on Amazon. I have a podcast, Resistance Rising, on Blog Talk Radio. Just go to JohnnyCirucci.com button on the air, click on the air button, and you'll see I've been blessed to have a tremendous number of interviews and go for more interviews there. I am a fiery Italian and former soldier, so I'm a bit of a hothead, and when I get to be a hothead, I can kind of use salty language, so I bleep myself on my show, but I've gotten into trouble with devout Christians for that. I'm sorry, it's me. I'm Italian. I can't change who I am. So JohnnyCirucci.com, Illuminati Unmasked, Secret History, Resistance Rising on Blog Talk Radio. And on JohnnyCirucci.com, loaded with columns. I'm an idiot. Almost everything I do is absolutely free, and I'm about to go under. I'm about to have to get out of what I'm doing because it's all free. The good news is that books, it's free. So you can go to my website and click on any number of those columns that bears these out. And here's what I pride myself in. I also have two writers and researchers. They're excellent at doing this, Nathan. I try to have one or more hyperlinks to a reputable source in every single column. So as an example of my writing, online, it's just a straight hyperlink. In my writing, it's footnotes and endnotes. And so, example, can I give an example? Oh, sure. Well, I'll give examples like how it is that there are Roman authorities that secretly run and control all the nations, especially my United States. I will say something like, for instance, the Jesuits own intelligence agencies. Intelligence agencies are the most terrible enemies of any nation. The CIA, the FBI, the NSA are America's most terrible enemies. Not Al Qaeda, not ISIS, not Russia. the most terrible things to the American people have been done by our own institutions because they're owned by a malignant foreign entity. And it's now a matter of historical record to understand that the CIA is the greatest trafficker in drugs. It's not the drug pimp down the street on the street corner. The worst trafficker in drugs are our own institutions. The worst trafficker in human beings are our own institutions. I highly recommend top 4 movies. One of the top 4 movies I recommend, great Jeremy Renner movie, Kill the Messenger, about Gary Webb, the courageous newsman from the San Jose Mercury News, courageous reporter from the San Jose Mercury News, who broke the story about the CIA trafficking of cocaine and heroin and dumping it on American streets to destabilize our own nation. And it's a shame that Gary eventually got depressed and shot himself twice in the face. You know, there are people that still believe that he committed suicide. It's absolutely ridiculous. But great movie. And so you have, and I also recommend, although you're not going to get the complete truth from Oliver Stone's JFK, phenomenal movie, almost a documentary, destroys the idea that our sitting president was killed by a lone gunman. You have this guy who worked for the CIA and the FBI, goes to the Soviet Union, picks up a bride from a colonel in Army intelligence, comes back to the United States with his Soviet bride without a hitch. Then hatches this plot in New Orleans. And you have, if nothing else, you have the Zapruder film, which clearly shows whether the Zapruder film was doctored or not. The killing blow to Kennedy knocks his head back, not forward. So clearly the killing blow came from the front, not from the rear. So really, anyone who is has an ounce of intelligence and is a serious researcher does not believe that Lee Oswald murdered John Kennedy. If Lee Oswald didn't murder John Kennedy, then there was a conspiracy. Who had the power to have the Secret Service stand down, to alter the route of the presidential limo, to affect communications that day, to have key witnesses disappear, be murdered, killed, die of cancer, to have the FBI force witnesses to conform to the Warren report? Are you kidding me? The FBI investigation is just as much Roman Catholic as the CIA. The FBI was founded by a Roman Catholic knight named Charles Joseph Bonaparte, great grandnephew of Napoleon Bonaparte. The CIA was founded, the OSS was founded by a Roman Catholic knight of Malta named William Donovan. Founded by Catholics, today run by Catholics. FBI founded by Bonaparte, devout Roman Catholic. FBI run today by James Comey, devout Roman Catholic. CIA founded by William Donovan, devout Roman Catholic, Knight of Malta, given the Order of St. Sylvester by Pius XII in 1944, Hitler's Pope. Today run by John O. Brennan, the drone executioner, Jesuit Roman Catholic. John O. Brennan was sworn in not by Barack Hussein Obama, but by devout Roman Catholic Joe Biden on a constitution minus the Bill of Rights. This is the kind of stuff that I hyperlink to. For instance, great story from Yahoo News, which shows that's true. In these disinformation sites, you'll have somebody say something like, write something like, today, Vladimir Putin said he will arrest George Soros as soon as he steps foot in Moscow. And you'll see there's a hyperlink on the word Moscow. And if you click on the hyperlink to verify the story, it goes to a Wikipedia explanation about the city of Moscow. Whereas if I tell you, devout Roman Catholic Joe Biden, honored by the Jesuits in Scranton, swore in John Brennan on a constitution minus the Bill of Rights, you click on the hyperlink, a mainstream source that verifies what I'm telling you. And so this is what I pride myself. Don't listen to me. Don't believe me. Go to my website, get my books, look up the footnotes, click on the link yourself, and verify it for yourself. We live in a Jesuit fabricated false reality to enslave you, to bring back feudalism, and to make you a slave to Rome, and we already are.
It's a beautiful way to sum up, because I'm going to ask you one final question, which I normally reserve for the beginning of my shows, but I'm going to ask you right at the end. How did you find out Earth is flat?
I'm a cynic. I'm a cynic, and just question, because I found all this other stuff out. I knew everybody else was lying to me. Why not NASA too? Why not scientists too? Everybody else was lying to me. And so I saw this flat Earth, and then I saw mainstream people, Barack Obama, cracking a joke about the flat Earth. What? If it's so ridiculously understood as fact, why are you cracking a joke about your opponents being flat earthers? Is there something going on? Is the Earth really flat? And so I examined. I refused to simply believe what quote unquote science told me. And I listened and started to see the Bedford level experiment, how Samuel Rowbotham conducted the Bedford level experiment based on the idea that water always finds its own level, and across a canal system of 6 miles was unable to find a discernible curvature. And according to what scientists tell us, it should drop, 6 inches every mile squared. So across 2 miles, it's supposed to drop like 36 inches, and across and it continues on logarithmically, so that over long distances you should see the horizon just disappear. It should not be there for you. And yet we have the Suez Canal, almost 100 miles you can see across, no discernible curvature. And so I started to get shocked and say, oh my, they even lied to us about our very reality. And just because I knew I'd been lied to and everything else, I just said, "What? Sure, why not? Why not astronomy too?"
It's really quite reassuring to know that Barack Obama's speech had that effect on you. It struck a chord, because it's there to bolster the ridicule against flat Earth. So for it to strike a light above your head, that's really reassuring.
If you already acknowledge him as a mainstream source, as a regular guy, if you acknowledge Barack Obama as a popularly elected president who really runs things, then it won't even fly right over your head. You'll laugh and move right on. Won't even register with you. If you believe that Barack Obama is a puppet installed to mislead you, to be an instrument of an evil authority behind his back, then you critically examine everything he says. And it's the red pill. It's what makes us in this community so different. Why people think we're crazy, because we just don't trust what we're told.
No, absolutely not. And with that, I'm going to say an absolutely massive thank you to Johnny Cirucci. It's been a pleasure having you on Flat Earth United Kingdom.
It's been a distinct pleasure to be on with you, Nathan. I am at your service. I'm sure that there'll be questions from your community, your audience, and for as long as I have the ability to come back, this was a great experience for me. Loved it, and a great time for me too, with the time differential too.
Superb. And to all of you who have joined us live in chat, thank you very, very much for being here. I've been Nathan Oakley. I'll see you all in the next video.